Restoration Theology, number 2, Milestones on the Road to Modern Restorationism. It was October 27th, 1553, and just outside the walls of the city of Geneva, Switzerland, there was a crowd of onlookers who, in the center of whom was a pitiful figure tied to a stake about to be executed. And you ask the question, well, okay, why do these people want to kill this guy? He must have done something really bad. Did he murder a man? Did he rape a woman? Did he molest a child? Did he instigate a war between nations? What could explain such animosity? Well, let me tell you. Michael Servetus was one of the most intelligent people in all of Europe. He had studied at the University of Toulouse in France. He's from Spain. He went to some school in France. And then he joined the retinue of Emperor Charles V as a page. And he traveled with the emperor and was even there when the emperor was coronated by the Pope. Michael Servetus wrote a book in 1531 called On the Errors of the Trinity, which put a target on his back from the Inquisition. And so he did what you would expect. He changed his name, moved to another country. That's exactly what I would have done. And so he moved to another country, he changed his name, and he had to support himself financially, so he did a lot with books. He published a French translation of a geography book. He wrote a pharmacological treatise and supported himself as a proofreader. And then he ended up studying medicine at the University of Paris. And in 1539 became a doctor of medicine and had a career as a doctor. In fact, as a doctor, he discovered that oxygenated blood moves from the right side of the heart to the lungs and then back to the left side of the heart. What's called pulmonary circulation. Michael Servetus discovered that, which is incredible. He mastered 6 languages, including his native Spanish and Latin, which was for scholars, and he was a scholar, so he learned Latin for that reason. He learned Hebrew and Greek because those are the languages of the Bible, and he learned French and Italian. That's a smart guy, being able to operate in 6 languages. Even years later, after he'd been a doctor in France, and he was successful treating patients and made a good living, he couldn't shake his passion for theology and ended up putting down his life's work into this book, Christianismi Restitutio. And on the cover page, the title page of this book, it says, well, I'm just giving the English translation. It's written in 3 languages. There's Latin, and then Hebrew, and then Greek, just as the title page, which, being a language guy myself, that's just awesome. Anyhow, the translation reads, "A calling of the entire apostolic church back to its original foundations." Now, if that's not restorationism, I don't know what is, right? A calling of the entire apostolic church back to its original foundations through the complete restoration of the knowledge of God, the faith of Christ, our justification, the regeneration of baptism, and the eating of the Lord's Supper. And then I've translated for you a little bit from the Hebrew and the Greek. But this book, it's called The Restoration of Christianity, got him in serious trouble. He sent a copy of this book to John Calvin, who was in charge of Geneva, Switzerland. And like I mentioned to you, Michael Servetus was hiding out in France still, under a different name, living as a doctor. And John Calvin told the French authorities who Michael Servetus really was, what his name was, and they arrested him. And when the Inquisition arrests you, it's bad because then you're tortured and executed. So like but for whatever reason, he was able to escape incarceration, and he ran away the second time from the Inquisition. He's on his way down to Italy from France. They're not all that far apart. And he decides to stop in Geneva, Switzerland, where John Calvin is, and attend the church service on a Sunday morning so he can hear Calvin preach. John Calvin recognized him and had him arrested. Now, once the French Inquisition heard that John Calvin had arrested Michael Servetus, they said, extradite him to us. We want to execute him for writing this book. And John Calvin said, no, he would handle it. Protestants are just as strict as Catholics, and Servetus would be found guilty. He assured the French Inquisition that he would take care of it. And Servetus was sentenced to execution. On October 27, 1553, they led him to the place. Lawrence and Nancy Goldstone write about it in their book, Out of the Flames. They say, when Servetus was led to the hill at Champel, the stake and pyre were made of fresh wood, green wood, newly cut branches with the leaves still attached. They sat him on a log and chained him to a post. His neck was bound with thick rope. On his head they put a crown made of straw, doused in sulfur. Chained to his side was what was thought to be the last available copy of his book. The rest having all been zealously hunted down and destroyed, the ideas were to be burnt along with the man. Sadly, Michael Servetus did not die right away when they lit the fire. It took a full half hour for him to die, and he was heard saying over and over, "Poor me, who cannot finish my life in this fire." They did that on purpose by using green wood, which doesn't burn very well and sputters and kind of takes a while to really go. But killing a man and killing his ideas are two different things. And a lot of Europe was actually really upset by what happened in Geneva, Switzerland in 1553. The Goldstones write about it. They say, Michael Servetus' execution marked a turning point in the quest for freedom of expression. Although thousands had been executed for heresy before him, and others would be executed after, the extraordinary nature of both Servetus the man and Servetus the representative of honest and passionate dissent rippled through Europe in ways that his enemies had never foreseen. And Michael Servetus' ideas survived. He died, but his ideas survived. In fact, you can get his book on Christie's auction, a 1709 facsimile, is currently for sale between $6,000 and $8,000 for a copy of it. So yeah, his book is still with us too. His ideas survived through a guy named Peter Genesius and Fausto Socini. Peter Genesius was from Poland. He had studied at the University of Padua down in Italy, and that's probably where he came across some of these ideas of Michael Servetus and others that were questioning the doctrine of the Trinity. And Peter returned to Poland, and in 1565 he established the Polish Brethren, which was a minority church in Poland. Poland being Catholic, Roman Catholic, but he was founding a denomination, so to speak, where there would be freedom. After he died, Fausto Socini, doesn't sound like a Polish name to me, definitely an Italian guy. Fausto, he joined the Polish Brethren in 1579 after Genesius died, and became their intellectual leader, shaping their theology. And the group in Poland became known as Socinians because of Fausto Socini. Okay? So the group was going along fine, and then in the 1600s, a new king arose, a man named Casimir, and he persecuted the church of the Polish Brethren severely and said that they had to all leave his realm. He exiled them from Poland, at which point they traveled wherever they could find a place to live and scattered throughout Europe. And this led to the publishing of their books called the Library of the Polish Brethren in the year 1665 in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. In their books of the Polish Brethren called Socinians, in their books they argue that faith must be voluntary, guided by reason and conscience. In their books, they argue that you should have peaceful coexistence of differing religious beliefs in a society. In their books, they argue that governments should be tolerant of religious differences and that religious beliefs should be rational and voluntary. These ideas we all take for granted. We all believe this in our bones so deeply that we've never even talked about it. Because, of course your belief should be voluntary. And of course the government should tolerate different religious beliefs. We live in the world created by these events that I'm talking about. And that's why it doesn't seem strange to us. But to them at that time, this was radical new idea. It influenced a number of English speakers, including John Biddle and Isaac Newton, the guy who we like to say invented gravity. He didn't invent gravity, but he did invent some good equations to describe the projectile motion in a gravitational field. So John Locke was really the key figure that read the Library of the Polish Brethren, and in 1689 he wrote a letter concerning toleration. Why is John Locke so significant? Well, because a lot of people were reading his book, or his books in general. And so John Locke put together a systematic case that governments should not compel religious belief. And those ideas of John Locke in England made their way across the ocean to America and the British colonies, such that in the 1760s, a guy named Thomas Jefferson read John Locke and studied him, and then in 1777 wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. This would be the first of the colonies to say states, to say we are allowing religious diversity in our state. 1786, James Madison helped to get this Virginia State Statute for Religious Freedom passed. And then in 1787, there was a very famous document written. Does anybody know what it was? The Constitution of the United States. And in the Constitution of the United States, which was influenced by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, a number of these other people who were reading John Locke, who was bringing the ideas of the Polish Brethren that Michael Servetus had really initiated in the 1500s. They're bringing these into this brand new country. And in the United States Constitution, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment. Well, actually, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. It said, in the Constitution, it says, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Okay? This is not a great big statement. It's a very small statement. All it's saying is that there's no religious requirement to be in the federal government. That's all it's saying. Okay? But then, in 1791, we get the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, we get this. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. This is an important phrase for us. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This part at the beginning, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. This changes everything. We should be so proud of this. That this happened in our country. You know what I mean? No longer would you get arrested, tortured, and executed for believing differently than the official government-sponsored church, the establishment denomination. And that's how it went after the Protestant Reformation, is that throughout Europe, where the Protestant Reformation occurred, each province would decide, are we Catholic or are we Protestant? And then that's it. And if you didn't agree with the Catholic Church or whatever Protestant denomination was in power, you couldn't go to church. They wouldn't let you have a church. And that's what happened in Poland when they got kicked out. And so in the United States, this suddenly changed. Governments began to separate moral law from religious practice. And eventually, each of the 13 original colonies that by this time became states disestablished religious affiliation. Between 1776 and 1833, each of those original colonies said we are disestablishing our religious preference. Okay? Because before that, if you were in Maryland, you had to be Catholic. That's the only churches that were allowed, and they were sponsored by the government. And before that, if you were in Virginia, you had to be Church of England, or in the United States, Episcopalian, right? And if you were up in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, you had to be a Puritan, right? And so each territory had their own religion that they supported by the government, and like you could have people from other branches of Christianity, but like they couldn't have a church, and they couldn't really participate in the government in any way because they weren't part of the in-group. In the 1800s, religion in America was disentangled from the government. Now, the Europeans, looking over the ocean and seeing all this crazy stuff happening in what became to be called the United States, they're probably thinking, surely this is going to kill Christianity. Everybody knows you need the government to protect the church, or else the church is going to die. That's what they thought. Since Constantine in the 300s, well, not technically really Constantine, but like he's the one that got things started. It was really Theodosius in the 380s, but whatever. Since the Roman Empire days, Christianity had been like this, married with the government, and there was this symbiotic relationship, sometimes pulling one way, sometimes pulling another way throughout Christian history. Governments fund the church. Governments pay for church maintenance. Governments ensure religious education occurs. Governments pay the pastors and the priests with the taxes that they take. That's how state churches work. Even to this day in Europe, many churches are still state churches, even though they have religious freedom. Now, in America, churches employed neither the support nor coercive force of the government. And we were flourishing. Christianity was flourishing in the United States in the 1800s. In 1822, James Madison wrote, "If a further confirmation of the truth could be wanted, it is to be found in the examples furnished by the states which have abolished their religious establishments. I cannot speak particularly of any of the cases excepting that of Virginia, where it is impossible to deny that religion prevails with more zeal and a more exemplary priesthood than it ever did when established and patronized by public authority. We are teaching the world the great truth that governments do better without kings and nobles than with them. The merit will be doubled by the other lesson, that religion flourishes in greater purity without than with the aid of government." This environment in the United States in the 1800s provided fertile ground for the Restoration movement. The Restoration movement in the United States began in the year 1801 with a man named Barton Stone. Barton Stone lived from 1722 to 1844. He was a Presbyterian minister, and he spoke at an event called the Cane Ridge Revival in Kentucky. Now, this was a huge event, a massive revival. Just imagine, like, way out in the country, cutting down trees, covered wagons coming from all over, different states and different denominations, and you have these revival preachers, and they literally stand up on a stump and they preach. Okay, if you ever heard somebody doing a stump speech, that's where it comes from, these kind of old-time revivals. And so Barton Stone is there, and he sees all these, he's a Presbyterian, but like there's Methodists there, and there's Baptists, and there's all these, and everyone's coming to God, and there's a sense of unity at this event. And he just yearned so much for unity between Christian groups and preached that returning to the practices of the early church and focusing on Scripture is what you need. So he said the Bible is what all the Christian denominations have in common. Seriously. Even you think Roman Catholic, Orthodox, Baptist, Jehovah's Witness, I mean, like, everybody recognizes the Bible as this. That's the one thing we have that unites all of us. It's incredible if you think about it. And so Barton Stone is like, let's get back to the Bible. This idea, back to the Bible, that is something that he very much resonated with. And that became a core belief in the Restoration movement, which brings us to Thomas Campbell. Thomas Campbell was, he lived from 1763 to 1854. He immigrated to the United States from Ireland. He had nothing to do with Barton Stone originally, but he was saying similar things, and he wrote a book called The Declaration and Address in 1809. Actually, I don't think it's really a book, but it's just a treatise, like a long statement. In 1809, and he saw the Bible as the solution for the divisions of Christianity because they just so troubled him. Why should we all be divided from each other? Why should there be so much division in Christianity? He said the Bible should be the standard for churches, not confessions and creeds. Thomas Campbell said that where the Bible speaks, the church should speak, and where the Bible is silent, the church should be silent. Which leads us to his son, Alexander Campbell. Thomas's son, Alexander, became the leading systematizer and intellectual in the movement. In 1811, Alexander Campbell founded a church called the Brush Run Church, and this was a church that rejected denominational creeds. It was an experiment. Let's try a church and see if it works, He served there and relentlessly pushed for people to look to the New Testament as the blueprint for the church over against tradition. And then in 1832, Barton Stone and Alexander Campbell joined together in what we call the Stone-Campbell movement. They united with each other, their groups. The result of this is what we call, in the history books, the Restoration movement. It's a big deal in the 1800s in the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if you've never heard of it, but I'm telling you about it now, okay? It was a big deal in the 1800s. It was exciting. The movement had a revivalist feel to it. It was unity-focused. It was very Bible-centered. The goal was to restore Christianity to Scripture instead of allowing the creeds and the confessions to divide us. And what was the result? Rapid growth. They pushed hard west. In the 1800s, the West was like the frontier. So they pushed to the frontier, bringing evangelists and missionaries and preaching to the people who were pushing west to homestead and like grab land and all that kind of stuff. And publishing, they published like crazy. And they also did public debates, like high-profile public debates, because their goal is to restore authentic Christianity. How are you going to do that? Well, you get two people that seem to know what they're talking about and have them disagree in front of a crowd and see what happens. That's a public debate. Sadly, the Restoration movement divided in the early 20th century in 1906 between the Churches of Christ and the Christian churches. And there were disputes over missionary societies and instrumental music that led to decline. Today, there's roughly, just skipping ahead, there's roughly about 7 million. It's hard to say exactly, really, but my best guess is about 7 million in the Restoration movement from the 1800s that are still in churches around the world today. Now, however, in the 21st century, I believe the time is ripe for a new Restoration movement. I say this because there have been massive advances in the last 2 centuries. And this is all... You gotta kind of trust me a little bit with the progress of this class, because like these are all subjects we're going to get into more later on. But I just want to mention them right here because I think they are just so significant. Manuscript discoveries, like what Erasmus published in the year 1516 when he published the first Greek New Testament. That was just based on a couple of a couple of fairly young manuscripts. Okay. They were like medieval manuscripts. They weren't like from the earliest times of Christianity. In the 1800s and the 1900s, we literally have found thousands of manuscripts of the Bible, both of the Old Testament and of the New Testament. Thousands, not hundreds, thousands of both the Old Testament, and thousands of the Old Testament in Hebrew, thousands of the New Testament in Greek. There wasn't even a field called archaeology up until a couple hundred years ago. It's all paleography, like this is all new stuff, okay? Number 2, textual criticism. Textual criticism is where you compare the manuscripts to each other. Let's say you're working on a particular verse of the Bible. There might be 70 manuscripts that contain that particular verse. How do you know which one is the most accurate, is the most trustworthy, contains the earlier form of the text before a scribe made a little change here or misspelling or changed a word, right? Because that happens with scribes. So getting back to the original, that's the field of textual criticism, and that developed in the last 200 years as well. Then we got English lexicons, like even literally our dictionary that tells us what the Hebrew word means or what the Greek word means in our Bibles that the translators use. Those are all new. They're all new, just within the last couple hundred years. So, and how do they even know what the definition of the word is? Well, a lot of it comes down to archaeological finds that have happened in the last 200 years, where they found not just the Bible manuscripts, but like all kinds of other stuff, especially in Greek, especially in Egypt, which we're going to look at later. And that informs what our dictionaries say. And so what I'm saying to you is that these things together, manuscript discoveries, textual criticism, English lexicons, means we get better English Bible translations, more accuracy, closer to the original. When you pick up a Bible today, it's more accurate than when somebody picked up a Bible 500 years ago. Forget about it if it was 1,000 years ago. Okay? So we are in an incredible moment in history where things are accessible. Let me say more. We have unprecedented access to so much. There's also a lot of early Christian history documents, what we call the early church fathers, that was just inaccessible to people. Like a guy named Jacques-Paul Mignet, a Frenchman, he's really the one that tracked down all the manuscripts of the church fathers in the 1800s. It wasn't until the middle of the 1800s that he did this work, and he started publishing them. And then we started getting English translations in the late 1800s, and then in the late 1900s, guess what? They all go on a website, and they're all in the public domain, and they're all free. And guess who else has access to them? Our buddy, the AI chatbot. We've had so many significant changes that enable independent research, including near universal literacy through public education. People also have leisure time. You need leisure time if you're going to do research, right? I bet all of us would have at least an hour a day of leisure that we just like, oh, I feel like doing this or I feel like doing that. A lot of us have multiple hours every day. And many of us also have time on the weekends for leisure to just do with whatever you please. The internet makes exchange of ideas possible. Anyone can have a website. Publishing books, like just average computer skill person can self-publish a book now on Amazon or other sources. And anyone with a smartphone can record a video and post it on social media, right? So we are in an unprecedented time for access to information, and not just that, but also telling others about what we have discovered. And now we have artificial intelligence chatbots, which is a huge step forward for research. And in this class, I'm going to show you how to use AI. AI is a game changer, but you've got to know how to use it, especially in its current form. It can make a lot of mistakes, and it doesn't necessarily know what you want. So telling it very clearly what you want within a certain domain is very important. So we're in a whole new era. Controlling institutions can't stop us anymore. Ideas are weighed based on their merits, not based on powerful governments who say that shall not be in my domain. Not based on wealthy universities, not based on narrow-minded legacy publishers who say, well, that idea is a little too out there, so we're not going to publish it. We're worried that we might get in trouble. We don't care about legacy publishers anymore. Like, is the book legit? Like, does it look good? Does it make sense? Is it written by somebody who knows what they're talking? That's what we ask. We don't ask, well, is it Zondervan or is it Baker? At least not most people. So two things are possible. You can access information cheaply, and you can spread ideas cheaply. And this changes everything for theology. So I'm going to show you how to use these tools, or lots of tools that are out there, to get answers. And you're going to learn how to evaluate beliefs in a systematic and comprehensive way. We're going to get there. That's what I mean by restoration theology, is this whole practice of like, okay, how do I figure out if my belief is legit? Does it line up with the Bible? Does it make sense logically? Does it make sense practically? Have other Christians believe this? Because unlike the sciences, we are actually, in theology, interested in what ancient people believed more than what some new idea somebody will come up with. We actually want the old ideas because we think they're more likely to be correct. So hopefully this will help us improve dialogue over doctrinal differences as we seek to recover authentic Christianity together. In conclusion, I hope you can see what I see. History seems to be providentially molded over the last 600 years. I know that's a big claim, but when I look at all these major developments, especially from the 1450s that we covered last time, up through today, the Protestant Reformation, and then the Polish Brethren, and then the United States government not having religion be part of the deal, and then the Restoration movement of the 18th. When I look at all of these moves, I say to myself, my goodness, it's almost like everything has been pointing to this moment we're in right now, which is awesome. We have an unprecedented level of awareness. We're not blithely accepting what the churches teach today is what they've always taught. We have an unprecedented level of freedom, not burned at the stake for believing something different than the authorities. We have an unprecedented level of access to information. We're not limited by physical books that are cloistered away in these university libraries that you have to pay huge amounts of tuition to get access to these books. No. They're on Google Books. Like anything old is accessible online for free. I think it's like 70 years or something is the copyright expires, and then it just becomes public domain, which is incredible. What a time to live in. There's a website called archive.org that just got like all the books that are available that are not copyrighted still. Whereas the newer stuff, you still have to buy stuff from time to time. But it's just incredible the access we have and the tools to discern truth. You don't need to have a specialized degree in each of the different fields in order to get the benefits out of it anymore. And we have time. In the old days, we were working all day and they were doing chores all night. There was no time. Now we have the time to figure stuff out. The only question is, do you have the desire? Do you want to know the truth? I hope you do. So next time, we're going to look at our foundation for Christian theology, which is the Bible. We're going to begin our series on the Bible, and we're going to talk about primacy and perspicuity. Primacy means that the Bible is at the top. So there's what you think, and then there's what the Bible says, and if there's a disagreement, the Bible wins, right? So that's primacy. Perspicuity is when you work out at the gym, you sweat a lot. No, just kidding. Perspicuity is the fact that we believe you can understand the Bible. It's a really funny word that not many people understand. That means you can understand. So it's a little ironic there. And that's what we'll do as we continue through this class on restoration theology.